Today, we have a great podcast with the one and only Mark Schaefer. We're going to talk about pioneering risk in the digital space, first mover or fast follower, and finally, three secrets for success right from the mouth of Mark Schaefer. Okay, thank you and welcome all our listeners for the Marketing Companion. And today, what an interesting guest we have. We have Mark Schaefer as a guest
Hey,
on the podcast. He's not
did you miss
interviewing
me?
me.
Did you miss me, everyone? It hasn't
Everybody
even been
misses
that long.
everybody misses you. And this one is going to be a great show. You all love hearing Mark's wisdom. And today we're going to talk about kind of the pioneering days of being digital. And Mark, you and I were chatting, and you just told me something that I thought was very interesting about one of your first. So why don't we start out there? So you were, believe it or not, the first at your company. I don't even know what company it was to ask for an internet account. So talk to me about
Yeah,
why you did that. What did you see that others didn't? And how did that response go?
yeah, it was kind of an interesting time of life, and it's funny because I've never really talked about this. Usually, I'm always talking about the future or what's next, but how everything got started is still really interesting, and I think there's some good lessons for today. Well, I was a young marketing guy, and I was working for this company called Alcoa. At that time, they were a Fortune 100 company, Dow Jones Industrial blue chip company, and they were a great company to work for. Well, I was eager to try new things. And my boss was like 45. He wasn't going anywhere. And I thought, what's next for me? What's going on? And this thing called the internet was beginning. And so I started playing around with it, experimenting with it. And I thought, look, there could really be some business opportunities here. And I had some ideas. I wanted to play around with it. I went to my boss. There was no internet at that time, and no uh, enterprise, you know, ERP system or anything. And I said, I want an AOL account, and I want to put it on my expense account so I can experiment with the internet and learn what it's about. We had a big argument. He thought this was a stupid waste of time. I think we were just starting to get into email at that time. He wouldn't even go into email. He said, "Look, I've been around business long enough. I want a paper trail on everything." And he finally moved to email because his boss, who was the vice president of the company, said, "Hey, I'm sending you these emails. You never respond to anything. What's going on?" Well, so I had this idea, Sandy, that you could buy and sell scrap. So I was working for a big metals company. Aluminum. We need aluminum to recycle. And so we created this thing. It was called a reverse auction. Have you ever heard of
Mhm.
that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We do them
You
today,
remember,
actually. Yeah.
you know that they in the early days of the internet, it was so popular, and you don't hear about it so much. They're also called a Dutch auction
Hmm.
because in the early days when like the crypto of like the 1700s were tulips, right? So tulips were this hot investment commodity, and they would have reverse auctions on tulips. And so like you have this transparency, and everybody's bidding on the tulips, or in my case, everyone's bidding on the scrap, and you could see it in real time. And the price goes down, 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 which if you're buying the scrap, that's what you want. So I had this idea and it worked. And all of a sudden, so I was working for one certain, business unit of this company, and the business finally woke up and said, "Oh my gosh, we need to create an e-business department for our whole company. Who's going to run this thing?" Well, I was the only one doing anything. They said, "This idea you have, Mark, this is bigger than you. This is bigger than this business. Come run this department." And it was so fascinating because Alcoa at that time, it's been split up into different companies now, but at that time, it was basically a holding company of 45 different companies. So I had to go and talk to 45 different companies about getting onto the internet. And we created this intranet, like this internal system where people could order their products and change their orders. And we were so early, Sandy, we had to install computer terminals at our customer locations.
Oh, wow.
They didn't have the computers to see the screens. And I think we might have created the first intranet in the world. I mean, I don't know how to measure that,
Yep.
but the people that were working for me back then, if we reminisce and they said, "Do you realize how far ahead of our time we were?" I mean, nobody was doing it back then. But so to me, it was just doing my job. It was like this is the next evolution. When I look back, gosh, I mean, it was a big risk. It was a homemade system. There was no Oracle, there was no SAP. It was a homemade internet system, and it worked great. It worked beautifully. It was reliably, saved us millions of dollars. But what was your early experience? Because you were a
Yeah.
pioneer.
Yeah. So I remember two. One, I was at IBM when e-commerce came out too. You just reminded me of that. And
Yeah.
we actually hosted the first Victoria's Secret ad on the internet. It was going to run on
Oh,
TV
wow.
and it was going to run on our commerce site.
Wow.
And it took us down and we got back up quickly, but we had no idea how popular that was going to be. Most people in the company felt like, why were we doing something digital if you've got it on TV? Like TV is the media. But
Yeah.
then we shifted and it was pretty awesome. And then the second one was we used to run these major IBM conferences,
Hmm.
and I held one for WebSphere. And we were the first, we were told anyway, it was featured in the Wall Street Journal, the first conference to use a hashtag for Twitter, now X, of course, um,
Yeah.
for our event. And we streamed it on the screen. So anything anybody tweeted with that hashtag was actually shown on a screen. And the thing that the Wall Street Journal thought
Right.
was so cool about it was that
Yeah.
like it just kept rolling off the screen because everybody
Yeah.
was like, no one's going to tweet. Like, what the hell is a tweet?
Yeah.
So it was kind of interesting. So I'm curious, Mark, just for everybody listening today, what do you see today that reminds you of those early days when you did this for the internet? And what feels fundamentally different? So now we're in the age of AI. Anything
Yeah.
remind you of those early days? And what's different than when you did this for Acola? Acola? Is that what it's called? Acola? Alcoa. Okay,
Yeah.
Alcoa. Okay.
It's short for Aluminum Company of America,
Oh,
or
interesting. Okay.
or for our international listeners, aluminium. So,
Okay.
yeah, I think one of the advantages to having been around a while is you see these patterns where it's very, very familiar. If you look at the early days of the internet and the early days of social media, and now you look at the early days of AI. Well, there was this sort of panic at first, like, okay, what do we do? We know this is big. We know this is, something we need to do. What do we do? Then you have like this fragmentation where there's all these different services, there's all these different web browsers for social media. Oh my gosh. I mean, there were a million different tools every single day. Some new tool, some new tool. Then eventually what happens? Consolidation, right? People start buying up these companies. There's a little bit of a bubble, right? Which was
Mm-hmm.
needed. There was an internet bubble. There was a social media bubble. There's going to be an AI bubble. And I'm not afraid of that. I mean, that's healthy. That's what we need to do. I think there were also a lot of people taking advantage of the situation, maybe not in ethical ways all the time.
Mm.
And I mean, some of the things in the early days of social media and search optimization was just appalling. I mean, you probably remember the black hat days. They used to call it
Oh
black
yeah.
hat, you know. And I'll tell you, Sandy, I remember it was one of the first social media conferences I ever went to, and this fellow was giving this presentation about he was paying people who were they were disabled and they were like working from home. He was paying them to like create these fake accounts
Oh
and
wow.
create all these fake comments to help SEO and everything. It was just totally unethical. And I listened to this presentation, and when he was done, my question was, how do you live with yourself? You know, what you're doing is totally unethical.
Yeah. And
And he
we're
said,
seeing that today already too.
same thing.
Yeah, same
And
thing.
we're actually it's on a bigger scale. This guy said, if I look, there's big brands paying me millions of dollars to do this. If I didn't do it, somebody else would. And
Mm,
so it's like there, and then, you know, my view always was stick to your values, do what's right, even when it hurts. Like even if other people are having some advantage because they're using these unethical tools, I'm not going to do that. And part of the idea behind that was, look, if you're doing something that's screwing Google, you're going to lose. I mean, just wait it out. You're going to lose. Now, we look at things like AI, where it's the same furious move to get ahead. And like, what are these companies doing? They're breaking the law on purpose.
yeah.
I mean, they're basically saying, we're going to just scrape everybody's comment. I just, I'm going to be awarded money from a lawsuit against Anthropic because they used my books. There was a class action suit, and I think in the spring I'm supposed to get money for compensation. But it's like, hey, you know, we just have to win. We just have to move ahead, and we'll raise money later for the lawsuits. But we're just going to break the law, and so there are definitely patterns that repeat. What do you see in your career?
Well, let's see. I think one of the interesting ones as a pattern is when you're first, I think you find a lot of fast followers. And there was then and there is now a debate of do you want to be first or do you want to be the fast follower? I don't know if you just saw, but iRobot is going bankrupt. And one of their comments, what iRobot does the little
Oh,
Roomba,
the Roomba?
yeah, the
Yeah,
little Roomba. They're the
yeah.
parent company. And in their statement, Mark, they said, we were the first to do this, and all the fast followers were able to do it cheaper, et cetera, because we were innovating. And
Yeah,
their advice was don't be first, be a fast
right.
follower, don't be first.
Mhm.
And so, I was told that when we came out first with the, digital ad and the first event. I disagree, though. I think that there is an advantage to being first. But if you are going to be first, you need to make sure that you're innovating at a record pace. You need to make sure that you are, that you're really, cutting your costs, being efficient, coming out with new things, listening to your customers, being customer obsessed so you don't go off track. I don't know. How do you feel about that? Don't be
Yeah.
first, be a fast follower. What do you think?
Oh gosh. Personally, well, I don't know. I'm both, I guess, in some ways, because I certainly have innovated in lots of ways, pushing the envelope on everything that I do.
Yeah, I'm just looking at your book back there with you were the first with that
Yeah,
QR,
with a
right? You were
QR
first.
code on the cover.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you were first.
Yeah, just just be bold and take risks. Um, but I look at companies like Apple. I mean, Apple was always a fast follower. They didn't have the first PC, they didn't have the first, music player, they didn't create the first smartphone, but they just made it better. And I think that is really the key idea is that you've got to replace yourself. Just being first is not enough. You've got to have the courage to reinvent yourself and say what's going on. And that you bring up a point that I'm going to be writing about soon around listen to your customers so well. This is a concern I have with AI because market research is basically dying right now. And I have a lot of friends who are in market research. They said all our work is dried up. With AI, you can get, maybe an 85% solution, and that's good enough for most companies. But the thing that troubles me about this, and it's very relevant to this point that you make, is that if you have an 85% solution, there's nothing that differentiates you. Everybody's going to have the same 85% solution. The real gold, the real source of innovation is in the 15% that you're not getting from AI. And there's a very famous example for it's not famous. It's famous for me that I'm gonna use in this post that I'm working on where when I was the marketing director for this company, we would go out and we would have formal listen to the customer visits. And it wasn't a survey that we sent out, it wasn't an email. We went out and listened. And so we went around the world, we met with all our customers, and it was the last session of the whole year. And as we were leaving, this researcher for Coca-Cola says, we were packing up our bags, right? He said, by the way, did you hear about this government research they're doing that they may outlaw this one certain chemical ingredient in coating for packages? We said, no, we didn't hear about that. Well, if that research was validated, it would basically destroy our whole product line.
Mm.
And we never would have heard about this if we hadn't listened and we hadn't been there in person and talked to our customers. That is not 85% research. That's the 15%. And that saved our business. We were able to get into this. And even though the research hadn't been complete yet, we said, look, we need to address this because if they find a problem, we need to be ready. And our competitors weren't. And so, literally, that little nuance saved our business. And so, how are you going to find those micro trends that are going to turn into something big? How are you going to find those little micro threats that are
Mhm.
bubbling under the surface right now if you're just settling for the 85%, research that your competitors, they've got the same information. So it's very troubling.
And this is why I loved working at Amazon Web Services. One of the things that we would not do is we would not just read research reports or even just do focus groups. We really emulated startups. So if you think about a startup, Mark, and you think about a founder, where does he or she spend most of their time? Well, 80% of founders of a new startup spend their time with customers because they're trying to sell their product. They're going to customize it. And they're so successful and they move so fast, I would argue, because they're hearing directly from the customers what's working and what's not working. So at AWS, we had a leadership principle called customer obsession. And it
Oh,
was
wow.
not okay
Mm.
for an executive to only have their teams or the marketing or research telling them what customers were saying. We had to spend at least a, a majority of our time with customers. And I think it made all the difference in the world. When people ask me, what was a secret moment about AWS? It was that requirement that up top and down the organization, we were all listening to customers. But Mark, you said something interesting. You talked about digital trends, and you talked earlier on that you've watched every major digital shift unfold, or a lot of
Yeah,
them
I
from the
did.
very
Yeah.
beginning. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, this question, how do you recognize the right signal or the right pattern so that this is it? Like, just think about how many things come up, right? You're not
Mm-hmm.
jumping on every one of them. How are you dissecting the micro trend, the micro signal, or the bigger signal that you're going to jump on, and which ones you're going to kind of leave behind as noise?
You know, that's no one's ever asked me that question before, and I'm not sure I have an answer. But I do have some discernment. I don't know if it comes from just experience or what, where you just see something. And do you remember there was a service called Blab?
Mm-hmm.
It was
Yeah.
a forerunner of Zoom. It was
Oh.
before Zoom. It was before, all the different services that was Skype. Yeah, and so there was this thing called Blab, and it was video conferencing where you could create
Wow.
content just like we're doing today.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we're recording the audio, but there's also, you and I are watching each other on this
Yep.
Zoom call as well. So the first thing it was Blab. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. This is it. This is the next big thing. And it was, but it just wasn't Blab because they ran out of money because it
Mm,
grew so fast.
mm,
They couldn't scale the server power that they needed to handle all these different calls. And they unfortunately went out of business very quickly. But, I could see that the idea was right. Um, I think for me it was like this. When when I was in the early days of the internet, and it's the same now with AI, it was the same way with social media. There was a lot of fluff. There was a lot of like, jazz hands going on about, what this could do, what this could do, and it was kind of fun and it was kind of sexy. And and I concentrated on one single thing. Does this technology help a company make money or save money? Period. If there was not an obvious case that's going to make money or save money, I dismissed it. And so for me, I basically created the e-business, enterprise system for this Fortune 100 company, including digital marketing, including CRM, including internet, including digital marketing and advertising, social media, and it basically got down to how do we make decisions? Okay, everybody thinks this is going to be oh so cool, but does it make money or save money? Period. That's what we're going to prioritize. And that served me very well. So maybe that's part of the
mm,
filter
mhm.
for me that can help determine what's really going to take off.
I think that's a great one because, I had a boss once, Steve Mills, who used to say, basically all we do is we make stuff and we sell stuff. And if it doesn't help you make something better or sell something better,
Yeah.
it's not going to be helpful. So, Mark, I have another question for you as being this digital pioneer. You grew up, you had entry level jobs.
Hmm.
And a lot of the entry level marketing jobs now are
Hmm.
being touted as AI agents, right? So
Yeah.
I was just with a company yesterday and they were asking me to look at their agent strategy. And, there was an agent for market research, there was an agent for landing page optimization, there was an agent for copy. Essentially, it was all the what I would consider entry level roles where you kind of
Yeah.
learn the business, right? And for this company, all those roles are going away now. And, when you do those, you develop kind of an intuition and you have a great intuition. I'm curious, what do you think about all these companies now trying to use AI for entry level marketing jobs? And how does that impact in the future someone being a pioneer if they're not growing up with something that can help them develop that intuition?
Well, it's a difficult question, isn't it? Because I think every company has a financial responsibility to run their company as efficiently as possible. And where the state of AI is right now, it's basically entry level position. I mean, you can treat it like an intern and talk to it like an intern, and it does a pretty good job. So that, the that part of me, I can certainly understand why companies would use it that way. I mean, I use it that way. I mean, I use AI to do things that, maybe 3 or 4 years ago I would have hired a person to do it. So, I mean, I'm guilty of it too. The difficult part for me is like I just remember when I was a young guy. I mean, I was just so green. I knew nothing. I knew nothing of the world. I knew nothing of, business and leadership. And just I was so fortunate to have amazing bosses who were patient with me and they taught me and they just let me make mistakes and the beautiful thing about this company that I worked for, Alcoa, is that I was my whole career, I was always the youngest person in the room. They just pushed me to give me the most opportunity to just see how far I could go. And a lot of those opportunities are drying up. And
Mhm.
I don't know what the solution is. I think I mean, at this point, I think people will over-index on technology. They will over-index on AI. And at some point, they're going to come back and they're going to say, where are our young leaders of tomorrow? Oh, we don't have any. We're going to
They're
have to,
agents.
yeah, we're
That's
going to
it.
have to create some kind of leadership program to still have some human beings in this business. I mean, I think that's what will happen. But there's it's a big gray area of uncertainty right now, isn't it? Because it's not just, where are the entry level jobs, but what do you even study in school to
Yes.
to get a job these days? So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, and I think it's also not just marketing. I'm having people come to me. I teach at Carnegie Mellon, Silicon Valley, a lot of coders there, and a lot
Uh,
of the entry level coding roles of testing and documentation are now going to AI too. I
mm,
think it's a mega challenge that we have to figure out. I don't know if anybody really has the answers for it, but a friend of mine is a pilot. And he was telling me, what do we do to train future pilots? We get them on a simulator. Like they work out some things
mm,
on a simulator. So
yeah,
I was thinking the other day, could that be a way? I don't know if it gets you the same intuition, but is that a way that we could train, like develop a simulator for young marketeers and it
mm,
simulates all of these kind of entry level jobs and maybe get them up to speed faster so they kind of jump over that entry level role that now AI agents are doing. I thought it was an interesting concept
yeah.
and a interesting way to approach it. Looking at some other industries that have, I mean, think about a plane. They've kind of had, go on autopilot for a while. And so anyway, I just thought it was kind of an interesting,
I
interesting
think
approach.
it's more than kind of an interesting idea.
Yeah,
I,
you like it?
well, because here's what's been in my mind. About a year ago, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal talking about this issue, and it quoted uh, leaders as saying, university students today should be prepared to go right into a management job because there aren't going to be any entry level jobs. So I thought, oh, how's that going to happen? Well,
Yeah,
maybe it's you have this simulator to get people up to that level, maybe after college. And look, when I think about some of the most powerful learning experience of my life, it was some sort of business simulation.
yeah,
We learned some incredible lessons through these, role playing, game playing,
yeah.
simulations in business.
In fact, I just did one the other day, which was very interesting. A company had an agent, so it simulated a company going with an agent that had gone rogue in the company. And
Oh
what
my,
do you do? You're the
yeah.
marketing leader, right? They assume marketing and comms were together. You're the marketing leader. Here's what happens. How does everybody work? And it taught me a lot. I'm not going to say it taught me as much as had I really gone through it, but I felt like it really did teach me a lot. Well, Mark, we're coming to the end of our time. So I wanted to close out with some kind of actionable insight from you. People look to you as a mentor, as providing some good advice. So, there's all these things we talked about today, being a digital pioneer, how do you make it when there's no more entry level roles? How are you discerning a signal or a trend from something that's really out there? If you had to give three pieces of advice, only three, to marketeers out there, regardless of level or size of company, or maybe they're a solopreneur,
Yeah.
what piece of advice would you give them right now in the age of AI?
All right. Well, number one would be work on your personal brand. It's the only defense you have against AI. It's the only asset you have that's transferable from company to company or whatever you decide to do in your life. So, and I shout this from the rooftops, especially if I do guest lectures at universities, work on your personal brand. That would be number one. Number two, dabble in AI, no matter what level you are. And sort of the traditional model for leadership is you delegate, the experimentation. But to lead, you don't have to have all the right answers. You can't have all the right answers, but you should have all the right questions. But you're not going to have the right questions unless you know what's possible. So you need to spend a little time every day on AI applications. To make images, make movies, make business strategies. Use to look into AI agents. So dabble and experiment uh, every day. So that would be number two. And then something that you said, I think is really important, and that is don't overlook this idea about don't be overwhelmed by AI and overlook customer research. When you talked about this very wise thing at AWS that you spent 75% of your time with your customers. I got to study under Peter Drucker, and he told one of the signs of a sick company is because someone asked him one time, Professor Drucker, you go in all these companies. How can you possibly know so much about these companies? He said, Oh, it's very simple, really. You just look at these signs. And if you see one of these signs, that means there's a deeper problem. And the first one is, are people in meetings all the time? Because if they're meeting in meetings all the time, there's fear in the organization. They're not being empowered to do what they're supposed to be doing. He said, 75% of your time should be spent with your customers, either internal or external. And so that would be the third thing is just don't abdicate that to AI. That is your competitive position. Your competitors can copy everything except how you treat your customers. So you've got to get out there and listen to your customers and don't be satisfied with that 85% solution.
That's awesome. Mark, thank you so much. I know everybody misses you, so thank you for coming on and being
Oh,
a
thank you,
guest.
Sandy, and
And
congratulations on the show and best wishes for all your exciting new episodes.
well, thank you so much, Mark. Thanks for coming on today. And don't forget those three lessons from Mark. This is the version of Marketing Companion, and we'll be back again in 2 weeks. Thank you.